There we go. I don't know what happens. Thank you for tuning in. Drop a like, drop a Z in the chat, subscribe. I'll edit out that first part in post. Z's in the chat. Thank you for tuning in. Let's just get right into it. We have an amazing guest today. I was just showing you our cool new merch that just came. You can get that linked in the description below. And without further ado, I want to bring on our guest, the one, the only, Scott Ritter. You know him. You love him. He is a former UN weapons inspector. He's an incredible man. He's the author of multiple books, including The Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, which you can find linked in the live chat momentarily. I'm going to wait for some of these Z's to pass by, and then we'll link that, and we'll link it throughout the stream. So here we go. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
Great. We've got a lot to talk about today. There's a lot going on in the world. There really is. So, I first have to say thank you for all your work that you've been doing. You've been a voice of clarity amidst all of the madness throughout the war in Ukraine and everything else that's happening in the world as our multipolar world really kind of takes shape. So, one question I asked the Colonel Douglas McGregor, when I had him on last, I've had him on twice now. I've been fortunate enough to have 2 conversations with you. Was what things from day one of the special military operation in Ukraine compared to today were you most surprised by? Did you maybe get your predictions wrong on? Like, what parts of it are you most surprised by?
I'm most surprised by the fact that Russia didn't go to war. Maybe I'm a person of limited imagination, but I just imagine that if Russia was going to put troops across the border, that they would do so doctrinally and in fulfillment of your standard military mission, which is to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower and maneuver. And I had anticipated, and I wasn't alone. Mark Miley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, briefed Congress that this war was going to be over in 72 hours. William Burns, the director of the CIA, said Kiev will fall within a week. And I bought into that assessment because it was an assessment based upon what would happen to the Ukrainian military if the Russians came across using, their standard doctrine. But they didn't. When Russia called it a special military operation, I thought that there was some legal niceties taking place, but that it was still going to be a war. But I think what shocked me is that Russia wasn't at war. Russia was sincerely trying to get Ukraine to the negotiating table to bring a rapid conclusion to this conflict with as few casualties as possible. And, that took me by surprise. And I think it took a lot of people by surprise. And I think it was widely misinterpreted. I think, looking back, I'm not blaming the Russians for what they did. Actually, it's noble and honorable for them to actually, be looking for peace, peaceful resolution to this conflict that was thrust upon them. But they didn't explain it very well, and they're pretty bad at information operations. And one of the problems that emerged from the special military operation is that many in the West refused to believe that was indeed what the Russians were doing, and they misinterpreted the soft approach that Russia took as a sign of weakness. And I think that empowered and emboldened the anti-Russian elements within the Biden administration, of which there are many, to put a halt to this negotiation that Russia was undertaking with Ukraine. There were 3 negotiations in Gomel, Belarus in early March, and they had the final 4th negotiation scheduled for April 1st in Istanbul, where a peace treaty was ready to be signed. It was, there's 70% certainty that this was going to be concluded. The war was going to end at that point in time. And imagine how many hundreds of thousands of people would be alive today if that had been the case. But the United States ordered their poodle, Boris Johnson, to fly to Kiev and terminate the peace process because there was the belief that Russia was weak, Russia was on the ropes. and that if we just doubled down and provided tens of billions of dollars worth of military assistance, that Ukraine could deal sort of a death blow to Russia and bring down Vladimir Putin. There was this hope that at long last we can get rid of Vladimir Putin. And but I think I got my equilibrium from an analytical standpoint back on track. After the April 1st cessation of negotiations, because at that point in time, diplomatic niceties were sort of pushed to the side and military realities came into place, and it became a much more predictable conflict. But that first part, I think it just blew my mind and blew almost everybody else's mind that Russia would actually go in soft. That the special military operation was exactly what Russia was calling it, an operation that wasn't designed to kill Ukrainian troops, kill Ukrainians, destroy Ukrainian infrastructure, but rather to pressure the Ukrainian government to the negotiating table. And the sad thing is, it worked. It actually worked. The Russians succeeded. They won phase one. Nobody predicted that the United States and Great Britain would step in and basically order Ukraine to commit suicide, which is exactly what's happened now. Ukraine has committed suicide because they had a chance to get the best peace deal ever. Imagine putting that peace deal on the table today, where Russia says, all we want is you to say Crimea is ours. The Donbass won't be ours. It'll be independent. And that's between you and the Donbass to negotiate down the road what the final status of that is. And all the other territory that we took, we give back to you. All we ask is that you don't join NATO. Mm-hmm. Imagine if that was on the table today. Everybody's saying, that's an awesome deal. That'll never be on the table again. And that's Ukraine's fault, America's fault, the British fault, not the Russians' fault.
I also think that'd be incredible. And obviously, they were very foolish for listening to the West. I think they were probably forced to listen to the West and, say no to that peace deal as it came so close to a final conclusion there. Do you think, though, if they had achieved that peace deal that said, these republics are going to be just that, they're going to be independent republics, self-governed, do you think that eventually it would have led to another standoff, another potential effort by the Russians to actually eventually do what they're now doing and fully incorporating them into the Russian Federation?
I do, not because of any ill intent on the part of Russia. But remember, when this negotiation was taking place, Russia was still laboring under the pretense that the Minsk Accords were at least be faithfully. It was impossible to get the closure on the deal. That's one of the reasons why this became a conflict. But Russia was laboring under the pretense that the West was serious about negotiations, that any agreement Russia could reach with Ukraine would be treated seriously by all the parties involved. Today, Russia is no longer, the wool has been removed from their eyes. They now know that Petro Poroshenko, Angela Merkel, and Francois Hollande lied when they entered the Minsk, that it was a sham, according to Petro Poroshenko, a sham deal to buy time, to build a military, to take over the Donbass. Russia would have negotiated an April 1st agreement, treaty, negotiation in good faith. Russia would have committed to certain things. But what we now know is that the parties negotiating with Russia weren't negotiating in good faith. The head of the Ukrainian intelligence services says the 1 April thing was also just to buy time. We would have signed it just to buy time so that we could eventually position ourselves to make a move on the Donbass to achieve what we wanted, which means Russia would have eventually had to do what they're doing now. And Putin has all but said that. He had a meeting with the wives of Russian servicemen where he apologized to them. He said, I'm sorry, I made a huge mistake. You see, I believed when the West said they were interested in a peaceful resolution to this problem in 2014, I stopped a military operation that would have led to the certainty of victory. What I know now is I should have completed the job then. In 2014, we should have destroyed the Ukrainian military and we wouldn't be doing what we are today. And I think Russia's learned that the West doesn't negotiate in good faith. Had they signed that 1 April agreement, no, this conflict would not have ended. Eventually, it would have bubbled up again, not because of anything Russia did, but because the West and Ukraine were not negotiating in good faith. They were always treating these negotiations, this Russian desire for a peaceful outcome, as a sham, behind which they would develop military capabilities to solve this thing violently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the West is still obviously escalating despite the fact that Russia's taking all this. And this is the craziest thing. Why do people say, why do the Ukraine, you know, delusional Ukraine supporters, because there's some that are, at least in certain circumstances, they're fair on, you know, different things. But like, most of them will tell you that, oh, Russia's lost 50% of the land that they once claimed in Ukraine, and that Russia's lost like 100,000 more men than the Ukrainian army. It's insane. You know, how, before we get into my next question, yeah, how do people even come up with these crazy conclusions? Because I hear this all the time, and it's just, at some point, reality is going to kick them in the ass. But how do people, you think, like, come up with this crazy stuff and continue to perpetuate it?
Well, I don't want to be insulting to anybody, and I apologize if what I'm about to say comes off as insulting. But the vast majority of the people who are, you know, observing the events in Ukraine are not empowered with the background, with the knowledge to make, you know, sound analytical judgments. They're prisoners of whatever source of information they choose to embrace. And so if they are inclined from the start, as most Americans have been, pre-programmed to be Russophobic, to be anti-Russian for everything, if that's your inclination, you tend to gravitate to news sources that feed you the information that says Russia's bad, Russia's no good, Russia's failing. And then you read this stuff, and because you're not equipped up here to cut through the BS, you say, yeah, no, I buy it. The British intelligence, I mean, British intelligence could never be wrong. And they're saying that the Russians have suffered, you know, 200,000 dead. It's got to be right, because British intelligence. Yeah, so that's the thing. And I mean, it's a sad statement, but unfortunately it's the truth. The vast majority of the American people don't know anything about Ukraine. Let's just be frank. They don't know anything about Ukraine. They don't know anything about Russia. They know very little about American foreign policy. It's all superficial. And they have been pre-programmed to accept at face value anything negative said about Russia. And when you put all of that together, you find a population that's ready to accept nonsense. But as you rightly pointed out, perception, propaganda, fiction can only last as long as the boot isn't kicking you in the butt. And the Russian boot is about ready to kick everybody in the butt. And there's going to be a harsh reality check when things start to happen and all the fantasy that you bought into evaporates and you realize you've been lied to. You know, there was a time when this happened to Americans, with weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You know, everybody bought into that narrative. They bought into it. I know there's a lot of revisionists out there that say, I never bought into it. Yeah, you did. Almost everybody did. I know, because I was the one leading the charge against it. Yep. And I have to tell you, I got very little traction, because most people went, no, Saddam's bad, man. Saddam's bad. Of course he has WMD. Come on, Scott, don't be naive. Why are you buying into this myth? But then afterwards, they're all like, no, I knew all along you didn't have WMD. No, you didn't. Everybody bought into it. And it wasn't until the fiction evaporated and we realized that we had been lied to that people woke up to this. And I think there's going to be that kind of, road to Damascus moment for a lot of people. Sometime I predict sometime later this summer, early this fall, where they're just going to go, wow, how did we believe all that? That was obvious. It's so obvious it was a lie back then, but nonetheless, many people believe in it.
How do you think Putin will be remembered in not just in like Russia, but like all parts of the world, specifically in the West?
That's a good question. Let me answer it. Start out by saying this: Saddam Hussein was, the butcher of Baghdad, the worst man in the world. You come up with whatever negative you want to say about Saddam. That's what he was. Today, people are taking a look at the mess that is Iraq, and even Iraqis are saying, sort of wish Saddam was here. We didn't have any of this when Saddam was here. And as time separates and people start to look back on the reality of the regime, they realize about 90% of the stuff that we were out there talking about Saddam just wasn't true, not fact-based. That when you cut through the myths and you get to the reality, Saddam was a man who governed an ungovernable country fairly well. And I think, 100 years from now, you're going to see a history of Saddam that's completely different than the, rush to judgment narratives that have been published. Vladimir Putin should go down, and I believe in Russia will go down as one of the greatest leaders in Russian history. And I'm talking about all of Russian history. Most Americans don't know what the 1990s were like in Russia, what happened in the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union. They don't know the role the United States played in, literally destroying Russia economically and corrupting it politically. People talk about the 2016 election here in the United States about how Trump and the Russians stole the election. And of course, it's all been exposed as fiction. Christopher Steele's dossier was just garbage. Everybody lied, but that doesn't matter. The perception's still there that happened. Ladies and gentlemen, we, the United States, bought the 1996 election in Moscow. We bragged about it. Time magazine actually put it on the cover, best election money can buy. We corrupted Russia. We destroyed Russia. People like Michael McFaul. I mean, if you read his book and actually assess what he's saying, the role that he played in there, he was a facilitator, not of democracy, but of autocracy, of plutocracy, of the oligarch class, of the corruption of Russia, because he hates Russians. Mm-hmm. He wants to keep Russians down. And so Vladimir Putin's the guy that came out and said, we're done with that. Russia's going to stand up on its own 2 feet. Russia doesn't want to be the Soviet Union. That's the other myth that's out there, that Vladimir Putin's trying to bring Russia back to the Soviet Union. If you know anything about Vladimir Putin, he doesn't really appreciate the Soviet Union. He appreciates Russia. He's proud of Russia. He's proud of the Great Patriotic War. But there's a little bit of resentment of the latter phase of Soviet power. He doesn't want to return to that. He wants a new Russia, one that has solved the problems that were manifest in the Soviet Union. The resentment that exists in the Michael McFaul class, the Fiona Hill class, the Angela Stent class, and these other, what I call them, Putin whisperers, who are people who made their reputation not by understanding Russia, not by understanding Putin, but by creating the mythology of Putin as this absolute leader who controls everything. I mean, look at the United States, high energy prices. Putin did that. Mm-hmm. Really? Every problem in the world, Putin did that. Putin did that. Putin did that. Putin didn't do any of that. Putin's the president of a nation, and he's actually a democratically elected president of a nation. And the nation is pretty big and complex and has a massive bureaucracy. It has, they have districts in Russia that are, half as big as the United States. And all these districts have to work together to come up with coordinated policy dealing with energy, dealing with resources, manufacturing, the economy. And they push that up, and Putin is the executive at the top who listens to what everybody says and then manages the decisions they have brought to him. He's not waking up every morning going, I need to raise gas prices in America, so how am I going to do that? That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. Putin is a great manager, a genius manager. What he's done with Russia, transforming it from the depths that they had reached in the 1990s to what they are today. Jackson, you mentioned you might go to Russia. When you go to Moscow, I'd love to have a conversation with you afterwards and get your impressions of what you see. Have you ever been to New York City?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been to the subway system?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't you go to the Moscow subway system and just give me a little compare and contrast? That's like, I also, when people say China sucks, maybe they do. But get on the Acela train from New York to Washington, D.C., this high-speed train, and as it's chugging along at 20 miles an hour through the railroad tracks passing Philadelphia because it can't reach high speed, then go to China and jump on one of their high-speed trains that goes everywhere fast, remarkable infrastructure. I love America. This is my country. I'm a patriot. I love my country, but I'm honest about my country. And my country has a lot of work to do to get to where we need to be, where we should be, where our rightful place, not in terms of the world, but amongst ourselves. We call ourselves, the bright, shining city on a hill. But hey, guys, who are we fooling? We got homeless in the streets. We got crumbling infrastructure. We got trains derailing. We got a political system that's just as corrupt and inept as you can imagine. American democracy, the greatest thing in the world. We want to export this. I wouldn't give this to the worst country in the world. We need to fix a lot of things here at home before we start pointing an accusatory finger at other people. And I say that about everybody. But Vladimir Putin, history will judge him as the greatest leader Russia has had in a long time. He's up there. What he has done in transforming Russia is on a scope and scale similar to what Joseph Stalin did. And I'm not here saying that Stalin's a good guy, but if you don't recognize that Stalin took revolutionary Russia, a nation just racked by civil war, surrounded by enemies, and turned it into, a powerhouse. I'm not justifying the means. I'm not sitting here. Scott Ritter's defending Stalin. I'm not. I'm just sitting here saying. I'm just sitting here saying that Joseph Stalin made the Soviet Union one of the greatest nations in the world. Not great in terms of ideology, but great in terms of functionality. Vladimir Putin took the ruins of the Soviet Union and has transformed it into one of the greatest nations in the world. Do they have a lot of work to do? Sure. That's a Russian problem. Mm-hmm. I'm all in favor of letting the Russians sort out Russia's problems for themselves. But who are we to sit here and criticize Vladimir Putin and criticize Russia? I think we should be making ourselves the best nation we can possibly be. And one of the best ways to help us do that is, why don't we be friends with Russia? I just want to say, when you read my book, Disarming the Time Perestroika, you won't find Scott Ritter, 1984-85, Kill a Commie for Mommy was my theme. Better dead than red was my lifestyle. I joined the Marine Corps for one purpose and one purpose only. If you think I'm joking, read the letter I wrote to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. I'm here to kill Soviets. That's all I wanted to do. I signed up to kill Soviets, and I spent a lot of time training to do just that. Then they sent me over to the Soviet Union to be a weapons inspector to implement the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and all the propaganda got swept aside. Look, what I saw was a dysfunctional country. The Soviet Union did not function like the United States. There were a lot of problems. But what I also saw were great people who have humor. Everybody thinks, they were Soviets. They're sort of these stoic people with no emotions. They laughed, they cried, they had families, they loved each other, they hated each other, they fought, they hugged, they did everything we did. That was what got me, is that they are just like me, a little bit different culture, very different language. But at the end of the day, we're human beings. And if we can just cut through all this nonsense, all this Russophobia, and deal with the Russians as humans, why can't we be friends? And imagine if we didn't have to divert hundreds of billions of dollars into the business of confronting an enemy that doesn't need to be our enemy, and instead reinvest that here at home. Wow. I mean, we'd have such a great country, a better country than what we have, and we wouldn't have to worry about waking up tomorrow wondering if nuclear missiles are going to be flying.
I share a lot of those sentiments, and I think, a lot of Americans today aren't necessarily, I there's obviously a lot of Russophobic Americans, sure, but I think even more than that, we're seeing that sort of mentality that just fundamentally anti-human, anti-civilizational like mentality directed towards the Chinese. And they are
same thing.
Yeah. Much different culture than the Russians compared to what we have in the West. But that's a whole nother, that's the next war. And we have to talk about this war. So, one of the things that's happening right now is the discussion of tank shipments to Ukraine from Western states. And now we have, I just saw this in the headlines, U.S. assessing Ukrainians for possible F-16 training. I saw that the U.S. just locked in a major F-16 munition sale to Taiwan. Again, different war. But what do you think the possibilities are here of F-16s and U.S. tanks ending up in Ukraine?
If this conflict wraps up the way that I believe it could, meaning that Russia achieves a decisive military victory over the Ukrainian military by the end of summer, early fall. And by decisive, I mean the Ukrainian military is destroyed, is incapable of continuing organized resistance. Then all of this is just talk, because no M1 tanks are going to be on Ukrainian soil before the fall of this year. Yeah. F-16s, you can't even imagine an F-16 flying in Ukrainian airspace until sometime, late into next year. So it's all theoretical. Now, If Russia fails to perform, and that's a distinct possibility, no outcome is guaranteed, and this war drags on, then I would say that you can see these tanks on the battlefield and F-16s. And could they have a meaningful impact? I wouldn't say they'd have a war-winning impact, except that Ukraine wins the war by surviving. Ukraine doesn't have to defeat Russia to win this war. Russia needs to win this war to win. A draw is a defeat for Russia. A Korean War settlement with a demilitarized zone is a defeat for Russia, because Russia will not have achieved its strategic goal, is to get NATO off of its borders. Any conflict that leaves the Zelensky government in place, the Ukrainian military with its distinctive NATO flavor, its proxy military, in a line of engagement with the Russians, is a victory for the West, the collective West. So for Russia to win, they have to defeat the Ukrainian military, they have to nullify the Zelensky government, and they have to put in place a pro-Russian government in Ukraine that creates the buffer that they're seeking. And then they have to have a negotiated settlement with the West about a new European security framework. And I believe that's the Russian objective, which is why I believe that they're going to do what's necessary to achieve that. But, no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. The enemy always gets a vote, and who knows what's going to happen. But right now, I see the chances of M1 tanks and F-16 fighters operating in Ukraine as slim to none. Talk to me in 6 months, and we'll see if I have to reevaluate that. That's the interesting thing about doing analysis is the conclusions I make now could definitely change once more data comes pouring in. Right now, the data seems to point to Ukraine in a resource deficient mode. They've burned through their reserves. They have insufficient reserves coming. Ammunition is a big problem. Jan Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, has said straight up, they're using more ammunition than we can provide. They're going to run out of ammunition this summer. I'm an old artillery guy. I can tell you right now, if you're in an artillery battle with an enemy that uses artillery and you run out of ammunition, you've lost that battle and you've probably lost the war. So if Ukraine is truly going to run out of 155 millimeter ammunition sometime this summer, that sort of tells you the trajectory of this conflict.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that if the Russians do you think that they'll try to, because everyone's been talking about the idea of landlocking Ukraine, they'd have to push through Nikolaev, go to Odessa. Do you think that's something that they're still considering, or, do we even really know?
Well, we do know, because Vladimir Putin told us on February 21st, he gave his State of the Nation address to the Federal Assembly. And in there, he said that, his number one priority is to restore the economic and social well-being of the newly acquired territories, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, and continue to develop Crimea. But he said in order to secure them, Russian forces will have to push the Ukrainians back from the borders the maximum distance of the weaponry provided by the West. Mm-hmm. Right now, that's 150 kilometers. That's the HIMARS with the small bomb missile. And if you take a map and you go to the borders of where Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk are, and you get one of those compasses, the old school compass with the point, and then the pencil on the end, and you go to the scale and measure out 150 kilometers and put that point there and just draw in little circles, you're going to see 150 kilometers gives you Odessa. 150 kilometers gives you Dnipropetrovsk. 150 kilometers gives you Kharkov. These are all cities dominated by ethnic Russians, which tells you that Putin just said, that's what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. That's the military objective. So yes, and once they take Odessa, I don't think they stop. I think Transnistria, where that little Russian enclave, and between Moldova and Ukraine, let's say it's 100. I'm just guessing. Let's call it 180 kilometers away from where they are right now. Russia will go the extra 30 because they're going to make that land bridge and they're going to cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea. Look, Ukraine has to understand that they're looking at the total destruction of their nation. They're never going to get the 4 territories that Russia's taken over now. They're never going to get that back. Constitutionally speaking, those territories are Russia, and Russia will never give them up, ever. And in order to coerce Russia to do it, you'll have to defeat Russia. That's called the existential survival of the Russian state. And if you read Russian nuclear doctrine, that means Russia will use nuclear weapons to prevent that from happening. That's how serious it is. So that's right now is going to be. It can't change. But what can be in the future is so much worse. Ukraine can lose up to 30% more of its nation. So by the time this thing is done, 50% of Ukraine will be lost. They'll no longer have access to the Black Sea. Economically, that's like driving a stake through the heart of the nation. And it'll just be a horrible, horrible situation for post-conflict Ukraine. So, but they're just not going to negotiate. You hear that right now. The Ukrainians have made it clear that they will not negotiate a settlement that doesn't include Russia giving back everything they've taken and surrendering Vladimir Putin to The Hague, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not how any nation should approach negotiations if they're serious about it. And I'm actually curious about that. When we talk about like war crimes, everyone throws around war crimes. There's war crimes committed on all sides of war, of course. But, assuming this war is going to end the way we all think it is, do you think it's possible that third-party nations band together with, Russia and try to perform some sort of a war crimes tribunal or Nazi tribunal on those in the Kiev regime right now and in the Ukrainian military?
Well, Russia's going to do it. The prosecutors in the Donbass are already preparing the cases. I've been studying Russia my entire adult life, first because I wanted to kill them, and later because I just wanted to understand what the heck's going on there. The Russians are very legalistically minded. Everything, even at the height of the Stalin excesses, people went through due process. It wasn't perfect. It was ugly, but they had to check off the boxes. Did we have a hearing? Yes. Did they confess? Yes. Do we have the confession signed? Yes. Have they done this? Yes. Did we put a bolt in the back of his head? Yes. Okay. So they did all that. They document it. Boom. These aren't guys going out doing knee-jerk reaction and just they're building very, very strong cases against, the perpetrators of the crimes and those who empowered them politically, especially. And I believe Russia. I had an interesting conversation with a guy named Dmitry Azarov. He was a former prime minister of Ukraine during the time of Viktor Yanukovych, the president who was ousted in the 2014 coup. And Azarov said, because we were talking about, okay, what happens, once the fighting's done? He said, well, denazification. I said, well, what does that look like to you? Well, how does that work? He said, well, we're going to have to put in a military type government that will control what's left of Ukraine. And then for a 2 or 3 year period, we will be carrying out denazification. That means that anybody who is affiliated with the Zelensky government, with this right-wing ideology, members of the Azov regiment, members of the other nationalistic units, all these are going to be arrested. Or if they resist, they will be killed. And then they will be re-educated. But that re-education process isn't going to be over in 2 or 3 years. See, Russia has learned the mistakes of the past. There was a big war. A lot of Americans don't know that the CIA funded the Ukrainian or the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalism, Bandera, in a ongoing resistance from 1944 or 1945 to 1952, 53 in what is today Ukraine. It was a very bloody conflict. During that period of time, around 46,000 Soviet soldiers and security forces were killed. About 220,000 Russian civilians were killed, and around 150,000 of these organization of Ukrainian nationalist fighters were killed. This is a massive fighting war. Around 150,000 others were taken prisoner. Many of them fled and came to the United States. They live in Ellenville, New York, just 60 miles south of me, where they have a monument to Stepan Bandera, their nationalistic hero, right there in Heroes Park. They're in Canada, they're in Germany, but a lot of them were captured and sent to camps for long sentences. And many of them were captured in 1953, 54. In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev gave his secret speech to the Presidium, and they began the de-Stalinization phase. And one of the things he did is he shut down the gulags, which I think was a good idea. But in the process, he released these political prisoners, these Banderas, these Nazis, these horrible people who were not re-educated. He released them back into Ukrainian society. And when you study how they insinuated themselves into Ukraine, political infrastructure and the control they had on the development of Ukrainian national identity during the Soviet times. These were people who secretly hated Russians, hated the Soviet Union, but now they're given positions of Soviet responsibility. And then that's what we got today. I mean, because of this, we have this diseased Ukraine today. And the Russians are looking at saying, we're never going to do that again. Next time when we do denazification, the Nazis will never come back. Again, I'm not a human rights guy, so I'm not going to sit here and say, I don't think the Russians are going to be lining them up against the wall and shooting them, but they are going to get very long sentences. And I think the bar for re-education is going to be very, very high. And some of these people have committed atrocities again, the American people don't understand what these people have done. Yeah. I just gave you some numbers that talked about what happened in the 1940s and 50s, and I believe these numbers were unheard. Most of your audience are probably going, what? 250,000 Russian civilians were killed? Yeah. How were they killed? Oh, read the Russian reports. The Banderas surrounded villages, brought out all the women and children, raped them, murdered them, put them in a building, set it on fire, and shouted, Slava Ukraina, glory to the heroes. The same things that Nancy Pelosi shouted in the United States Congress. I guess she didn't realize she's shouting out a slogan that is the Ukrainian equivalent of Sieg Heil. Slava Ukraina is the war cry of the Banderas as they slaughtered Polish and Russian civilians. It should never be said.
I agree. Yeah, even those numbers I wasn't fully aware of. Like I've heard that it was very bloody and it was gruesome, but those numbers I was unaware of. Just goes to show how much U.S. propaganda affects everyone, But
and the other thing you have to know is that the CIA funded this.
I was aware of that, and they helped Bandera hide. I knew that, and but that many people dead.
Yep. It's a scope and scale that's unimaginable to most people. Just like the war. I don't know if you saw General Cavoli's speech that he gave to Sweden last month. He's the commander of U.S. forces and Supreme Allied Commander. Uh-huh. He spoke in Sweden, and he basically just said, what's happening on the ground in Ukraine is beyond the imagination of any NATO leader. We couldn't even conceive of a war this bloody. The violence that's taking place, we can't. And again, to put this in perspective, during World War II, the United States lost, roughly 300,000 people, combat casualties on both fronts, Pacific and Europe. And we're talking about D-Day, Iwo Jima, battles. We've all seen the movies, and we're like, man, that is the hardest fighting. That's really bad. The Ukrainian army has lost that amount of people in 1 year, which tells you something about the fighting that's taking place. If you've taken a look at the videos of what, Mariupol looked like, the moonscape, if you take a look at what Bakhmut looks like and what other towns where this fighting takes place, they're totally leveled. You take a look at the terrain. The level of violence that's taking place was beyond the imagination of a 3-star American general. He said, the U.S. Army is not prepared for this kind of fighting. We're not trained, equipped. We don't have sustainability issues. We don't have the right tactics. We've done nothing right. We can't fight that. This is what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. This is what the history of Ukraine is on a scope and scale that we can't imagine. The amount of violence that took place there in the 1940s and 50s, and the violence that's taking place there. And what fuels this violence? Hatred. The Ukrainian nationalists truly hate the Russians. They view them as subhumans. They mock them. They call them orcs. A lot of times they capture these ethnic Russians, and they saran wrap them to poles, and then they paint their face green, and they beat them, and they leave them there to die of exposure. These are good people. That was facetious, by the way.
when people say, like, I've seen video, I try not to look at too much of the gore because it's just, at the start of it, I saw so much. I'm sitting here in Los Angeles in a air-conditioned apartment studio while I'm recording this, and still, like, seeing all these videos, it actually gave me nightmares, like seeing just these crazy war videos day in, day out. So I had to kind of just take a step back and be like, well, this is this is crazy. But right now, I mean, it's even way worse. I hear stories like, well, first of all, they're sending the untrained Ukrainians to the front in Bakhmut because it is a meat grinder, and they're using them as political pawns to try and get more weapons for the West. I hear, and maybe you could talk about this, confirm this, or deny. I hear that the average life expectancy once you're on the front in Bakhmut is about 4 hours, 4.5 hours. And as Ukrainian troops are trying to withdraw to the eastern part of Bakhmut away from the Russian encirclement, they're, walking like 8 miles through just like piles and piles and piles of Ukrainian soldiers' corpses. It's just horrendous what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I can't speak in an informed fashion on the life expectancy of a Ukrainian soldier. I mean, I've heard that. They talk about, they had one guy who I deemed to be credible, talking about companies being devoured in a day, battalions being devoured.
How big is a
week.
company?
Company is about 150 guys, 130, 150 guys. It's a wartime company, so let's drop it down to 120 because nobody's fully staffed during war. But so 120 guys are getting devoured in a day. And this is a battalion. Now, remember, in Bakhmut, we're dealing with brigades. Brigades are composed of multiple battalions. So a battalion is losing 150 guys a day. There's several battalions operating. So you're probably losing close to 1,000 guys a day in Bakhmut. Again, the scope and scale of this violence is something that nobody can imagine. The number of dead is mind-boggling. And the thing about the Ukrainians is, they end up, for the most part, abandoning the battlefield, which means they leave the dead behind. And so, when the Russians are counting casualties, they're not doing it theoretically like we did in Vietnam, where we say, well, we fired X number of artillery shells. We anticipate each artillery shell achieve the following probability of kill, and we estimate that we killed this many Vietnamese. No, they're counting the bodies. They're actually tagging and bagging the dead bodies and getting the names and the passports and doing a list. So when the Russians come up with casualty figures, they tend to be very accurate casualty figures about the number of Ukrainians that have been lost.
Mm-hmm. Last question about the battlefront. Bakhmut is basically lost for the Ukrainians. I see Zelensky saying that he said, he's at odds with some top generals as to whether or not they should stay or they should go out of Bakhmut. I don't think there's much a question as to whether or not they can do attack or like a serious withdrawal at this point, or evacuation. But where does this leave us moving forward once the business is settled in Bakhmut? The Russians, where will they be going next with all the troops that they've fully taken over Bakhmut with in the Wagner company? Where do they go next? And what does that mean for the rest of the fighting in the Donbass?
Well, understand that this war is more than Bakhmut. Right now, there's a lot of attention being put on Bakhmut. But the Russians are carrying out offensive operations throughout the entire line of contact with the Ukrainians. In some places they've been making 5-7 kilometer a day advances. In other places they've been pushed back. It's war. Mm-hmm. Anybody who thinks this is easy, people are like, "Where's the big Russian offensive?" I'm like, "What's happening right now?" I mean, it's happening as we speak. Well, why aren't they doing big arrow stuff? Well, because the Ukrainians are sort of dug in. And I think I need to make this point. Regardless of what you think of the Ukrainians, whether you call them Nazis or this or that and the other thing, respect them as fighters. These guys are doing something that we can't. No American alive today has gone through what the Ukrainian soldiers are going through right now. Mm-hmm. They're the second best army in Europe today. The best army is the Russian army. The Ukrainians are the second best army. They would take any fighting formation NATO has right now and take it off the map. That's how good they are. These are fighters. They know how to fight. They've been blooded, and they understand how it's like to fight, with a Russian artillery barrage and how to survive in that environment. We don't. We spent the last 20 years chasing villagers in Iraq and chasing goat herders in Afghanistan. I'm not denigrating the guys that got in the occasional firefight over there, but nothing that happened in Afghanistan or Iraq comes close to replicating what's happening right now in Ukraine. So we have to give the Ukrainian soldiers, a nod. We may not like their leader, we may not like their cause, we may not like what they're fighting for, but we have to acknowledge these guys are fighting. You know who acknowledges? The Russians do. Wagner. We talk about Wagner, this vaunted fighting force, but look at the respect they show to the Ukrainians. These are guys that are, they're killing 1,000 of them a day, but the Ukrainians are killing a couple hundred Wagner guys a day. 100 a day. And so the Wagner guys, they have the highest respect for these Ukrainians. They're killing them. They're fighting them. They're going to slaughter them. But at the end of the day, when they get the bodies, Prigozhin, the leader, treats them with respect, puts them in a coffin, and then speaks words to them as they are heroes who died for their country, because he can call them heroes because he knows the heroic fight that they're putting up. I don't think we understand what the hell's, excuse my language, going on over there. The level of violence is phenomenal. And so when people are like, well, why aren't the Russians moving faster? Well, good Lord, because Ukrainians are fighting. Ukrainians are putting up resistance. These aren't a bunch of yellow-bellied cowards. These are hard MFs. They're fighting really, really hard for a cause that many of them believe in. Yes, there are territorials that are being recruited that aren't trained, and they're going to the front line, and they're being sacrificed to buy time. But there are an awful lot of hardcore Ukrainian fighters out there that are, have put up a great fight and will continue to put up a great fight. Whatever victory Russia gets will be hard-earned. It's not going to be easy, but it's ongoing as we speak. If Bakhmut falls, and again, I say if, I believe it will. But remember, if you study the Battle of Stalingrad, General Chuikov had, 100 meters of territory on the west bank of the Volga River that he was holding on to that constituted the Soviet control of the city. And the Germans were coming in. And then if anybody had said early on in the phase of Stalingrad that Germany wouldn't be able to push them through that last 100 meters and take the city and have a victory, Vegas wouldn't take those odds. But Germany didn't finish the fight. The Russians were able to hold on, push back, and all that. Who knows how this fight's going to end? I believe that the Russians are going to complete the task of encircling Bakhmut and destroy whatever forces are there. And when that happens, it's interesting. Zelensky just came out and said, if that happens, the reason why he's holding on to Bakhmut so strongly is that if they lose Bakhmut, the Russians will sort of have a clear path to, additional towns to take, Kramatorsk and others. I don't know if that's, propaganda or whatever, but the bottom line is Bakhmut is the final bastion. That was the anchor of the Ukrainian defensive line. And when it falls, Ukraine will have to build a new defensive line. And I believe they're out there digging around right now doing just that, but it will never replicate what they had built for 8 years. Remember, the defenses that Russia's been attacking, the Battle of Bakhmut has been ongoing since May. Nonstop violence. And the Russians have been reducing the most heavily entrenched fortified area in the world. And when Bakhmut falls, that's it. Russia has now pushed through that defensive belt, and they will be able to roll up the Ukrainian defenses. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing. Remember, Vladimir Putin has said, we are going to consolidate our control of Russia. We're going to kick the Ukrainians out of Russia, out of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk. Right now, Ukraine occupies around 30% of Donetsk. That has to be liberated after the fall of Bakhmut. That's what will happen. And then they will push them back further. And in the process of doing so, I think they will destroy the Ukrainian army as an effective fighting force. So I think that's what we're going to see. If people are expecting, something out of World War II with a giant arrow, big sweeping advances, I don't see that happening. One, because it's just a different kind of war, different technology. You get a tank out there exposed. There's anti-tank weapons right now that'll take it out. You have to go slow, deliberate. You have to bring in a lot of artillery to pave the way. Plus, Russia's not in the business of losing Russian soldiers haphazardly. They want to keep the casualty figures manageable, which means they're going to have a very controlled fight, one where they dictate the outcome by dominating the tactics. They don't want to do something haphazard that gives the Ukrainians a chance to launch a quick counterattack on the flank and cause problems. That's going to happen anyways, because the Ukrainians are good and war is hell and mistakes are made. And, the enemy has a vote and no plan survives initial contact with the enemy and all that other kind of stuff, Murphy's Law. But I see the fall of Bakhmut being the beginning of the end of the Ukrainian resistance, because everything after that will be an attempt to recover from that defeat. The Ukrainians are assembling reserves. They are receiving, Western equipment, the Leopard tanks and stuff, but I don't think that that's going to be in numbers sufficient to do anything more than be a temporary harassment. It's sort of like the Battle of the Bulge. Mm-hmm. I mean, it looked good at the time, but when it finished, everybody went, well, the Germans just blew all their reserves and there's nothing left. There may be a Battle of the Bulge moment for the Ukrainians down the road where they launch this attack and they bloody the Russians' nose. But when that's done, they got nothing left. Russia has everything, and the war will continue.
I don't want to keep you too much longer. We're about 45, 50 minutes right now. Maybe like one more question, two more questions if you have the time.
Whatever. I'm here for you.
Okay. So. Thank you. I'm sure everyone appreciates it, as I do. When you were talking about the Russian military being so equipped right now, in the face of like all other militaries across the globe, what's the reason behind that? Is it size? Is it history? Is it their people? Is it that, they fought other war, like Syria? What is it? Why do you think that they are so capable?
Well, first of all, it's doctrine. The Russians have a doctrine, an approach to war that is logical, in terms of, Russia's capacity. Historically, Russia has emphasized artillery. And I think the wisdom of that decision is being played out in Ukraine. The United States has historically made heavier use of close air support. We do combined arms operations where we have artillery, but the artillery has been supplanted in many ways by close air support. But that was, that's a legacy doctrine that came out of World War II and then later on Korea and Vietnam, where we were dealing with air defense systems that weren't as sophisticated as they are today. The integrated air defense network that Russia brings to bear on the battlefield precludes the kind of close air support that we're used to provide. And so artillery now becomes the key. The Russians have learned, though. They had a drone doctrine that was insufficient. It wasn't sufficient to the realities of this battlefield, and that's why they have brought in Iranian technology, adapted that, and redefined their drone approach. The drone war that's taking place in Ukraine right now is mind-boggling in terms of sophistication. The tactics that are used, the counter-drone tactics. It's a giant chess match that's being played out, and that's part and parcel of the artillery war, where you have drones out there finding targets, the artillery shooting, other drones detecting the artillery shooting, so counter battery comes out, radars. It's a very complicated war, but Russia has more artillery than anybody. Mm-hmm. And they have the ammunition to sustain high rates of fire. And so Russia's able to bring more violence down on the enemy than they can bring on Russia. And that's have to think. But Russia's learning. I think the Russians have learned, for instance, when they started this conflict, the basic combat unit used by Russia was called the Battalion Tactical Group. Basically, you take a motorized rifle battalion, you throw some tanks on with it, you throw some artillery on with it, some engineers and reconnaissance. You have this self-sufficient Battalion Tactical Group that can go out and maneuver and fight. What they're finding is that Battalion Tactical Group isn't capable of sustained combat in this environment. It gets eaten up too quick. And if you're defined as a battalion tactical group and it gets broken down and you don't have a group larger than that to absorb them and operate, your combat efficiency drops. So what Russia has done during this pause between the mobilization of 300,000 reservists and what we see today is to reorganize. The battalion tactical group is not the premier thing. They've gone back up to regiments. So you're dealing with the regiment. You have battalions in the regiment, but the regiment's the principal organizational structure, and the regiment is support of a division, and the division's in support of an army. And so what the Russians are doing are making sustainable combat organizational decisions that can absorb the extraordinarily high number of casualties that are taking place on the battlefield, but maintain combat effectiveness. In the West, we've gone to the brigade structure. Now, we always brag that our brigade was capable of defeating the battalion tactical group, probably not 5 of them, but there's a lot of Russians out there. But the brigade is not a sustainable. If we take our brigade and we throw it into this cauldron here, our brigade will cease to be combat effective in a couple of days, and we don't have an organizational structure capable of sustaining that fight. So we have to start taking a look at how we organize. Brigades doesn't hack anymore. We have to start talking about divisions. What that means is when we speak of a division, we have to accept the fact that we're going to lose brigades. And when you lose a brigade, you still have a division capable of fighting. This is transformed it. The Russians have learned a lot. They've adapted, and they're ahead of the power curve when it comes to being able to field a military capable of sustained combat operations in the modern battlefield. The only other army out there right now that can do this is the Ukrainian army, but they can't do it as well as the Russian army.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. It's all foreign to me. I don't know a lot about like militaries and this internal stuff, so it's very interesting to me. The last question I have for you is surrounding what's going on in Georgia right now. Now, Georgia is a country that's also been a target for NATO accession for quite a while. It's a country that's seen its own share of U.S.-backed political manipulation, coups, all this sort of stuff, violence, of course. And right now we just saw some headlines. I'm reading this right off the website here. Police break up anti-government protests in Georgia. Demonstrators besiege the parliament over proposed laws on foreign agents. So if you can, please give us your analysis on what's really going on here. And I'm sure we're probably, who knows how the government's going to deal with this, but it's very possible we're going to see more of this in the news in the coming weeks. What are your thoughts on this madness in Georgia right now?
Sure. Well, I got to start off with the classic full disclosure. My wife is Georgian.
Okay.
And she's from a town called Sukhumi, a city called Sukhumi, which is part of Abkhazia. And there was a civil war back in 1992, 1993, where the Russians backed Abkhazian separatists and ethnically cleansed her family. So I have deep ties to Georgia, and I'm fully aware of what's going on in Georgia today. Georgia has, from the very beginning of its nation, sought to align itself with the West, modern Georgia, and they have been very receptive to American involvement in the development of the Georgian nation. And one of the ways that we get involved is that we bring in non-governmental organizations. It's a standard approach to come in, and you have non-governmental organizations that insinuate themselves into every aspect of Georgian society. Then the U.S. Agency for International Development begins flowing money into these things and targeting, using the NGOs to shape Georgia the way we want Georgia shaped. And there's a lot of resentment right now in Georgia towards the domination of almost every aspect of Georgian society by the United States government, directly and indirectly. So this has manifested itself in the Georgian parliament passing a foreign registration act. Before people react and say, well, that's just absurd. We do it here in the United States. Okay. Yep. If you're a foreign agent, you have to register. The fact is, we've prosecuted people for failure to register. And so, it's what nations do to protect themselves from having foreign powers come in and indirectly take control of the nation. So the Georgians are saying, we want to do a foreign registration act. And all the groups in there that are owned by the United States but don't want to admit that they're owned by the United States are saying, we don't want to have anything to do with this. And so they're right. And look at the United States. We're sitting there telling the Georgians, don't you dare do a foreign registration act. Shame on you. If you do that, we'll sanction you. It's the hypocrisy and the double standard doesn't appear to be. But the Georgians are calling out the decades-long, basically soft coup that's been taking place where the United States has used non-governmental organizations to take control of every aspect of Georgian society. The Georgian government's trying to gain control of this because it's a risk. Right now, these NGOs are fueling a new Georgian nationalism that is being used by the United States to try and position Georgia to open up a second front against Russia. Now we come back to what I talked about at the beginning. There's a lot of Georgians that recognize that this would be suicide. There's a reason why my wife can't return to Abkhazia today, because Abkhazia has been taken over, Georgians have been evicted, and Russia is guaranteeing its security. The same with South Ossetia. A lot of Georgians don't want to see Georgia permanently lose these territories, although that may have already happened. But they definitely don't want to see more territory stripped away by Russia because of continued conflict. And so in order to stabilize the situation, they want to reduce the indirect influence of the United States. If the United States wants to influence Georgia in the future, they have to do it the old-fashioned way. They have to come in and say, I represent the United States, this is what we want, and give the Georgian people a chance to debate that openly. But you can't have an open debate when the participants of the debate are bought and paid for by the United States, because now it's a fake debate. You've cooked the book, so to speak. And so this is what's happening. It's a very difficult struggle that's taking place in Georgia right now, but it's one that has to happen if Georgia is going to emerge as a truly sovereign state. In order to proclaim yourself as a sovereign state, you must be free of foreign influence, especially the foreign influence that is insidious and you don't know about. And that's why the Foreign Registration Act is so important.
Well, hopefully we don't see a Maidan 2.0. I mean, hopefully they get this situation under control. It seems like a very sane, rational, logical thing for them to do. So saying that we have it here, Russia has it on their books, it's every country should have that. If you don't, you're going to end up like Ukraine, and well, then your sovereignty goes out the window. So, Scott Ritter, thank you so much for joining me. Again, everyone watching right now, I have linked Scott's website, Scott Ritter Extra, where you can read everything he's writing. Thank you, by the way, for the shout out in your last posts about me being on the kill list. Badge of honor. I'm right there with you. And also, you can find Scott's book in the second link I'm sending in the live chat right now. Let me get that for you guys. Which is Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika. So be sure to check both of those out. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure. I always learn a lot when I talk to you. So hopefully more conversations in the future. And I really wish you got to speak at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I was very upset that you didn't get to speak there. And so I had to say that. You have any last words for the audience as we part?
No, just again, thank you very much for having me on. It's been an honor and a privilege to talk with you, and hopefully we can do it again.
All right. Thank you again. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Z is in the chat for Mr. Ritter. Very, very based. Very, very based. He's in the chat. Look, we got a lot of news we're going to be going through, so stick around. Thank you so much. By the way, if you'd like to support our show, our work, you like the conversations I have with people, by the way, subscribe right now if you haven't subscribed yet, because on Thursday, tomorrow I'm taking off, but Thursday I'm going to be back with Russia's deputy representative to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky. So I'll be back with Dmitry Polyansky on Thursday. You're not going to want to miss that conversation. Subscribe right now. Also, if you'd like to support the show, I have my locals, my Patreon, and my Give, Send, Go link below in the description of this video. You can check out any way you'd like to support the show through a one-time donation, monthly donation. You can do that there. Again, it's just linked right below here on YouTube and Rumble. Also, the first link on YouTube and Rumble is our merch. You can click on that link, and it's going to take you to our merch website where you can get your Z merch. And also this new merch I have today. I'm wearing it today. It looks fresh as hell. Always and forever in our hearts. The Ghost of Kiev. The Ghost of Kiev. I love this shirt. Look at, you can see the full fit. I haven't even washed it yet. It's a perfect fit. This is high quality shit. So we got our Ghost of Kiev shirts. We've got our Z shirts. Looking fresh as hell. Get your merch right now. Thank you to everyone who gets the merch because YouTube has permanently demonetized my account at the behest of, you can't super chat, you can't do anything. I don't get ad revenue or any of that stuff. In fact, I checked my analytics. You can check this now. Someone sent me the website. You can check. There's a website that predicts how much you make on YouTube, and it's pretty accurate. Just to put it in perspective for you guys, if you don't know how much YouTubers make, and how much I don't make because YouTube permanently demonetized my account at the behest of the Ukrainian government. I would be making, they say I'd be making $53K a month. Can you believe that? It's like, first of all, that's way too much to be making for just doing YouTube. But I'm like, holy shit, $53K a month they're stealing from me. All because the Ukrainian government, their Ministry of Digital Transformation soyed out that I'm telling the truth. So, thank you to everyone who gets your merch because it keeps the show running. And thank you to everyone who donates. I see people saying you got your Z shirt yesterday. I hope it looks nice. Post pictures in your merch. Tag me. I'll retweet it. I'll retweet it. Although I know some people like to keep that stuff private. Especially my German audience. You guys tell me like you can't even wear it. You can't even do that because like you'll be prosecuted. I have so much news. We might just stream tomorrow. I have a dinner tomorrow, but so I won't be able to stream at my normal time, but maybe I get up early. Maybe I get up early and I stream early. I don't know. Well, that was a great conversation. Scott is awesome. I got to meet Scott in person when I went to DC for the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I met him at the Jimmy Dore show the night before, and he's just a great guy. So it was very nice to meet him in person. And I said, Scott, I want to have you on the show again. It's been way too long. So I was happy he was, he was down right off the bat, said, yeah, I'm down. And so I'd like to have Scott on again. Like I have a bunch of stuff that I didn't even get to because and this doesn't happen with every guest I talk to, but with Scott in particular, he'll say something and it actually, I find every guest I bring on to be interesting, but with him in particular, he's just such a walking encyclopedia. He says one thing and I'm like, oh, I wonder about that. So I put away my questions because then I'm like, my questions are kind of stupid because I want to learn more about this, that, or the other, So I want to learn about how the Russians are taking Bakhmut with just shovels in hand. We should make a shovel shirt. We should make some merch with shovels on it. Someone come up with a good idea for what would be an idea if you had something, because you know how they're saying that Russia is winning with shovels. Let's make a shovel. Yeah, I see people are saying shovel shirt. Yeah, let's make a shovel t-shirt. What should be on it though? What should be on it? If you were to have like shovel merch, because I'm all down. I think that's the best. That's like Ghost. Okay, so we have our Ghost of Kiev shirt. We need our shovel shirt. We have both. We need both. The two biggest propaganda stories of the whole entire war. And you know what? Scott said he's going to send me a copy of his book, which I'm very excited to read. I'm going to send him one of my shirts. I'm going to send him one of our Ghost of Kiev shirts, I think. Or should I send him the Z shirt? The Z shirt goes pretty hard. What should the shovel... Someone send me a DM as to what we should put on, or on Telegram or something. What should we put on the shovel shirt? And we'll get it going. Should we make a Z out of shovels? Someone said shovel Z. Should we make a Z out of shovels? Rocket propelled shovel, but I need like an animation I can do. Should I just sell shovels? Z shovels? That'd be kind of hard too. Z shovels. Prigozhin with a shovel. Shovel and sickle. World War shovel. We'll do a special edition Z shirt. So it's going to be like the normal Z shirt, but it's going to be a special edition Z shirt. But all the Z's. So the Z, we have a Z here and we have a Z on the back. It's this one. We'll do a special edition Z shirt like this one. But we're going to have, instead of it being the Russian Z, And that Z is actually from the Russian. That's from like Russian military propaganda. Instead of doing this, it's gonna be shovels. We'll do a special edition Z. I think that'd be good. You know what? There's so many comments as to the shirt ideas with the shovel. Well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to look at these. Also, if you guys ever have any merch ideas, let me know. Let me know. I'm not a creative genius over here. So if you guys have any ideas as to what we should put on our merch, let me know. It really does keep the show going, selling the merch. So let's get into our first story. Next story, first story. Drop a like, drop a Z in the chat. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got a bunch of people watching. We've got I think we had 9 or 10K watching between YouTube and Rumble. It's crazy. So, I don't know how many stories I'm going to do, but we're going to do a few. Oh my God, we have to do this one first. This is crazy. Or should we do this one first? Oh, let's watch this video. This video is so good. This video is so good. Sergei Lavrov, I've given the man endless praise because I think he deserves it. I think he's really, truly the best diplomat in the world right now. I am happy that he's at the helm of Russia's diplomacy because we need someone like him, someone who is historically literate, someone who is very strategic, someone who is, can be respectful, but also cunning in all the right ways. I think he's great. He's a very smart man. And he's able to explain everything so well to a Western audience that may be ignorant, not by their own doing, but because of all the propaganda we have, may be ignorant to actually the history of what's going on in the world and what is going on in Russia right now. Okay, so this video went viral because he was speaking in India about everything regarding the war in Ukraine, everything regarding, oil markets, economics. And someone asked him a question about this recent United Nations vote about the condemnation of Russia's special military operation. And he discussed it because he was like, well, it's not really what you think it is. Okay, it's not really what you think it is. In this clip, Sergei Lavrov explains how the United States and the West, the Anglosphere, basically blackmails countries into voting how they want them to vote, even if, based upon their own sovereign decision-making, they don't want to vote how the United States wants them to vote. It's very illuminating. Take a listen.
The developing world...
Let me get the volume.
The developing world basically was silent until the West started blackmailing them, threatening them, sanctioning those who would not sanction Russia. You know what? Many friends of mine in the developing world, they're telling me how this is being done. When the West says, the Americans tell them, you must vote this way or else. And they say, okay, I will vote the way you want me because I believe this can be explained by the United Nations Charter and so on and so forth. But what do I get in return? And the answer from the Americans is, you would not be punished. Fair deal, very fair deal. Then I have quite a number of friends in New York, and when I was there for the last General Assembly, I talked to them, and they were many, if not most of them, were saying that they fully understand what is going on, and that we should not be angry at the way they vote. And they told me what arguments the Americans have been using when they persuaded people to vote in the General Assembly against Russia. The arguments are very straight. Don't forget that you have a bank account in such and such bank, and don't forget that your kids go to Stanford. Bluntly. And I'm sure that there are many people in this room who know that this is true.
So basically, not only threatening, countries, not only threatening sovereign peoples, but also taking it to the personal level of saying, like, hey, You remember when we got your kid into Stanford? We did that little favor for you. Got your kid into Berkeley. Well, I think now at this point, looking at how Berkeley's going, and if you've seen Berkeley recently, I mean, a guy lit himself on fire last week in an effort to put out the fire that was, killing the man in broad daylight. A Berkeley student threw a bicycle at him because they thought that would put out the fire. So, maybe it would be in the best interests of these foreign diplomats' kids if they did get, banned from Berkeley or they got taken out of Berkeley. But, they say these things like, oh, we're going to get your kid taken out of Stanford, out of Harvard, out of Yale because of, we got them in there, So it's just very crazy to see how it even goes to that personal level. And you see this stuff in the movies, you see this stuff like it's, what's that movie with Ana de Armas? It's like the United Nations movie where they do the whole, was it in Iraq? I forget. You see this stuff all over the place in the movies, but this is like literally what's playing out. Fortunately for the Russians, they totally understand this, and they're not going to let it sway them in one way or another or cast, ill will against a certain country because they understand how it works. They also understand that they can't control it. It's like the various mechanisms of blackmail that the United States has on all these countries in Africa or Latin America, wherever, they can't control it. So they can't overpower the United States yet. So this is what they have to do. They have to put up with it. And they say, well, the explanations given by these diplomats or these politicians, executive leaders in countries X, Y, and Z, will have to suffice. Publicly, sure, they say this, but, they're voting this way in the United Nations, but privately, they're telling us the truth. So there's the truth from Sergei Lavrov. Pretty interesting. All right, so let's get in. What else do we have here? Let's see. Oh, this is crazy. So, you guys remember, right? The United States blew up the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, committed one of the largest industrial terror attacks on our own ally in Germany. We're not even allies with Ukraine, officially. Like, if you look at the legal definitions, we are not allies with Ukraine. We are allies with our NATO partner, the single largest industrial base in the EU, Germany. And we blew up their pipelines because we worried that Germany was going to negotiate either peace deal or removal of sanctions or an end of the arms flow to Ukraine in return for the Russians flowing gas through the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines again. So the United States said, well, you can't flow gas through the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines if we blow them up, right? So remember when that happened? And Seymour Hersh, one of the most accredited journalists in American history, proved that. He told us the full story. He told us what happened. You can go read the article for yourself on Sai's Substack, but he told us exactly what happened. The New York Times didn't talk about it. Washington Post didn't talk about it. The Biden administration scoffed at it. But one thing no one did really truly was debunk it. No one said, well, that's not true because of this. This is what actually happened. No one said that, okay? So it is really odd that Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz just visited the Biden White House and almost, in robot unison, everyone understood the assignment. The assignment, if you were a White House press correspondent on this day when Olaf Scholz came to visit, was no one is allowed to ask any questions about how the United States, Joe Biden, the man sitting right there next to Olaf Scholz, blew up his pipelines. Take a look at this. Aaron Matte tweeted this out. Scholz's visit underscored that U.S. media is state media. No joint presser for obvious reasons. They can't risk a question from a German reporter about Cy Hersh's Nord Stream scoop. Everyone here got the memo. No U.S. outlet covering Scholz's visit even mentioned Hersh's story.
Transatlantic partnership is really in a very good shape today, and this is very much thanks to your leadership. So I'm really happy to be here to talk with you.
We're glad to talk about it. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you so much. Thank you, President. Thank you so much. Mr. President, let's go. Thank you so much.
He's like, where's Jackie? They all want to ask me about Nord Stream. All I want to know is where's Jackie?
Mr. President, how concerned are you about China
Like, they're all yelling to ask questions. No one's even yelling to ask a question about the pipeline. They're like, China, what about war in China? When are you going to launch the war on China? Mr. President, Mr. Schultz, what do you think about bidding the knee to China?
Really?
Will you take a
We're
question,
gonna head
Mr.
out now.
President?
Guys, we gotta head out. We're gonna.
Will you, Mr.
Thank
President,
you so much, Press.
how
Thank you.
concerned
We're
are you
gonna head
about
out now.
China? Will you be
Thank you so
discussing
much.
China?
The amazing thing about this is if any one journalist asked a question about the Nord Stream pipelines in front of Schultz, it would simultaneously be the most viral moment, like positively viral moment for that journalist's career. And also it would result in them losing their job.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're heading out now. Yes, we're all heading out. Thank you so much. Yep. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yep.
Will you
We're
be
all
talking
heading out
about
right now.
China,
Thank you
Mr.
so
President?
much.
Will you
Thank
Will you talk about China? Will you talk about China, Mr. President?
Thank you, Sally. Thank you. Sally, we're gonna head out now. Thank you so much. Yep. We're gonna head outside. Thank you much. Thank you much.
No joint presser for them. If you need more confirmation that Biden bombed Nord Stream, look no further than him refusing to take any questions alongside the German chancellor. We also have this right here. So Olaf went on CNN to talk about Nord Stream. Just kidding. He didn't talk about Nord Stream. Not one question from Fareed Zakaria about Nord Stream as German Kuckmeister Olaf Scholz rambles on about his country's supposed energy independence. Oh, he's got, Olaf Scholz, amazing leader. He took his country down the path of energy independence by refusing to address the fact that the United States blew up his two major pipelines into his country. Fareed intervenes only to push Scholz to commit more money to Ukraine's military and therefore less to German social welfare. Take a listen.
And the second is that we made us independent from the supply of gas, coal, and oil from Russia. No one really expected 1 year ago that we would easily economically survive a situation.
Easily economically survive. Well, the total price tag of you guys canceling Russian, energy into your markets is estimated to be a tally of at least $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Is that really all that easy economically of a survival? $1 trillion and extra costs as a result of you canceling out Russian energy sources?
Where there is no gas supply to Germany and many parts of Europe from Russia anymore. But we did in increasing the capacity of
No, you didn't. The United States did when they blew up your pipeline.
LNG imports from the western ports of Europe, and also building new ports in the northern shores of Germany, using for a longer time as we planned coal plants, also using nuclear plants which were running out, but we increased the possibility for them to produce electricity. And so we made it, and nothing of what some people expected happened. There is no economic crisis in Germany. There is no gas shortage or something like that. And
all the
there
more
is
reason
also
to spend more money on defense now.
And there is also social stability. Yes, we spent altogether 300 billion to stabilize our economy and save the pockets of the normal people, that they can survive a situation of increasing prices and increased prices for energy, which we are seeing that they are going down again.
So Olaf Scholz is a good little lapdog of the U.S. empire. He's really good at his job, but it's like, this is just the script. They're not allowed to talk about it. I saw this today. So U.S. Congresswoman, supposed to be the challenger of the Biden administration, Democratic challenger, challenging the, pro-war sentiments in the Democratic Party. Rashida Tlaib, she's part of the squad, the progressive squad. She was asked a question today, sitting next to Michigan's former, I believe he was a gubernatorial candidate or deputy governor. He was some candidate in Michigan, this guy right here. I forget his name. But they were sitting together doing this Q&A segment at University of Michigan. And this Q&A conversation was specifically about environmental justice. So you'd think the conversation about environmental justice, maybe they'd be talking about East Palestine, Ohio. Maybe they'd be talking about the largest industrial environmental terror attack in recent human history, one of the largest in all of human history, which was the explosion of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. But they weren't. Alas, they were not. Thankfully for us, there was one individual in attendance at this conversation who decided to ask the question, what about the Nord Stream pipeline explosions? This was again, one of the largest industrial environmental terror attacks in human history. Major environmental damage as a result of the explosions on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. Thank you very much for asking this question. But you wouldn't believe their response. Take a look at this. It's very, very similar to what we saw from Olaf Scholz.
All right, so this is the last question.
That's not how we're doing questions.
Nope.
Any place that you could get more money for the Wayne County region, that it would come from the $100 billion that we've sent to, over $100 billion to Ukraine to fight a war, which I can't imagine if we're talking about moneyed interests and talking about big lobbying groups, that there wouldn't be more of an effort to go after that. Further, the revelations recently over the Nord Stream pipeline explosion from Seymour Hersh, which point to the very clear evidence that it was the United States that did the bombing, I think is a very important thing to identify, because you, Congresswoman, have not voted against the funding of Ukraine. And it puts to the lie the whole notion of the rules-based...
This is unrelated. Stop him. This is about an environmental justice panel. This is he's talking about the largest industrial terror attack, environmental terror attack, and one of the largest in human history. And he's talking about nuclear Armageddon and nuclear fallout. That's so unrelated from the environment. I want to talk about the real threats, anthropogenic climate change. I don't want to hear any of this nonsense about East Palestine or nuclear fallout or the Nord Stream terror attack. I don't want to hear about this.
I'd like to hear from you.
It's an important question. Let me finish.
I know what it is. Down.
And so my question is, if
Write it down.
if we're promoting this idea,
I love it how they're just like, this is our last question of the night. Here you go. Here's the last question. And now they're like, we don't like your question. Write it down. Sir, this is not appropriate. Write it down.
rules-based order, yet we proceed to blow up pipelines, including an ally, Germany, then will you continue to go along?
Don't answer the question. Did you see what he just said there?
Pipelines, including an ally, Germany,
Uh-oh, he brought up Nord Stream. What are they going to say?
then will you continue to go along?
Don't answer the question. No. Don't acknowledge the question. No, of course not. I'm a sitting U.S. Congresswoman. Of course I'm not going to acknowledge the question. That person's then telling the truth. Of course I'm not going to acknowledge that.
With this lie,
Habibi, thank you. We really appreciate the input.
Habibi.
And thank you for your care and consideration. We have a process that we've been following. I think your question is a very important one. It's not really the space, right? It's kind of out of context. There are a lot of important questions. We're not trying to answer all of them here. So
Didn't they just say literally about like, this is an environmental justice panel and this is our last question? And now they're like, Habibi, we can't talk about this.
So we're talking about specifically environmental justice, specifically in this region. Really
Perfect. Environmental justice. Perfect. Yeah. Nord Stream pipeline attack, nuclear fallout. That kind of impacts everyone in every region. Dumbass.
really appreciate your question, and I appreciate your care on the issue. We're not actually going to take it because there was a whole process here that we'd really appreciate you respect it. So thank you for your question. Really appreciate it. Understood. Not the right venue, not the right time, not the right space. Thank you so much. All right, next question.
So this
Go talk about nuclear fallout somewhere else.
is the This is the last.
I think you should just read the question.
Yeah, here we go. Ready? I'm going to hold the mic up
here.
right here. So this last question's in first person. So it's not actually me asking the question. I work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
Be covered up. Where's the dignity? Where's the honesty?
He's like, we're talking about environmental justice here. He's like, yeah, I know. I work for the EPA. I work for the Environmental Protection Agency, and this is being covered up.
Where are you going to tell the truth? This is a lie that you're allowing to continue to be told at the expense of your own constituency. Think of the $100 billion that could be going to Detroit, could be going to Dearborn.
All right, I tried to say it kindly.
You're blowing up things around the world and walking us into nuclear war.
So here, I'm just.
So here's the thing. It's just not the right time to talk about Habibi, nuclear war. This is not the right time to talk about nuclear war, Habibi.
So everybody focus on me. Focus on me. All right? I want to say something here.
Focus on me. Don't focus on the guy telling the truth. Focus on me.
There is a world in which sometimes people with great intentions miss the mark on the folks to whom they should be aiming those great intentions. I'll be honest with you. I do not think, and I don't think anybody in this room thinks, that this congresswoman
You don't have to do that. Can you just grab the
here we go.
card?
is the person who's leading that to happen. So let's go ahead and answer the question.
I'm just grab the card.
All right. So this question says, I work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Myself and many of my colleagues work tirelessly.
Congresswoman Tlaib, I need to know, will you support Representative Gates' resolution to pull troops out of Syria?
Oh no, another information terrorist in the crowd. Another information terrorist. Arrest them! Arrest them!
These wars are going to get us killed. We are forcing the Syrians into massive starvation. This is not something to ignore. The bill is going to be voted on Wednesday. Why are people ignoring this? People are dying in your name. You are my representative, Representative Tlaib. I demand an answer to this resolution. I'm going to call your office. I'm going to be at your office. We need to pull our troops out of Syria. We need to stop the sanctions on these wars. Oh my God.
Peasant, be quiet. Peasant, be quiet. Hush, hush. Hush, hush. Shh, shh, shh. Be quiet, peasant. Stop asking about war. Stop asking about nuclear fallout, terror attacks. Yeah. Shh. You're done. You're done. Listen, honey. Listen, Habibi. Listen, Habibi. The Hague will not be investigating the terrorist attacks on the Nord Stream pipeline. And we won't be asking any questions either. Of course not. Of course not, no. Ah, you love to see it. All right, what else do we got here on the agenda? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We got more news. More news on the way. I did want to look at this. And we're going to get to the Adam Kinzinger beef in a moment. We're going to get to that in a moment, so stick around for that. Because Adam Kinzinger's literally attacking me right now. That guy's insane. That guy's actually insane. And, what a dumbass. What a dumbass. Like, how could you just verifiably stand with Nazi terrorists like that and just think it's okay? In fact, let's just show him. What should we say? What should we say? Because he also refuses to fight me. Because I've offered to fight him. I have offered to fight. Actually, I challenged him to a fight. It's not an offer. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. A challenge which he, he's seen it. He just doesn't respond to it. It's like, how are you such a bitch? First of all, his wife is DMing other men. Second of all, he refuses to fight me. Like, that's just such a bitch move. And he works at CNN now. Oh, boy. Oh boy. Let's do this. What should we say here? What should my tweet, let me give you guys the lore first. Let me give you the lore. But what should my tweet to him be? I feel like it should be this. Adam Kinzinger. Oh, I gotta tag him. At Adam Kinzinger. I need something spicy. Let's call Haas and see what he has to say about this. And then I'll tell you the story. One second. Bro, I literally called Haas. He's live right now and he didn't pick up. I need a good tweet to send to Adam. Haas always oh, here he is. Here he is. Bro, I'm live. Because I need like a good tweet to send to Adam Kinzinger. You saw that war we're having right now?
Yeah.
So I'm going to have my whole audience mass tweet something at him. What should I say?
Am I live right now?
Yeah, you're live.
Let me go on your timeline to see what he said.
You're the best at coming up with these tweets.
So Adam Kinzinger said, are you talking about what he called you a traitor?
Yeah, but he still refuses to fight me, to box me.
Ah.
And
what did he say exactly?
Let me see here. He said definition of a traitor, and then he said, take a look, everyone, and let me know what you think. One of Tucker Carlson's guests, he stands with Xi and Kim Jong-un. Traitor.
So which one are you going to respond to?
I'm going to make my own tweet, and I'm just going to get it viral, so it's clogs his mentions.
Ah, okay. So Adam Kinzinger. This guy's the NAFO guy, right?
Yeah, he's a Congress member.
Wasn't he like a Republican?
Yeah, but he was like a Democrat Republican.
Yeah, he's like one of those Lincoln Republicans, right?
Yeah. Like I could just say some like bland shit that I know will pop off, like he's a Nazi terrorist, but like I kind of want to have something good.
Didn't your grandpa fight in World War II against the Nazis?
Yeah.
You could say, you could just go for the honest thing, because he's calling you a traitor. You're the grandson of someone who actually fought Nazis, and you're just continuing that legacy. Meanwhile, this fucking guy is basically an unregistered foreign agent of the Ukrainian state. Nowhere is the adventure of the Ukrainian coup in our fucking constitution. Zelensky is not our fucking founding father. Well, all you're saying is we need to pull out of this fucking war. And it's an outrage that this bought-out, lobbyist, piece of shit, corrupt motherfucker, Adam Kinzinger, who's totally fucking bought out by
I think I got it. Adam Kinzinger is an unregistered agent of the Nazi Ukrainian terrorists and refuses to fight me. Bitch.
Yeah.
All right, we're going with that.
Yeah.
Retweet it.
Yeah, I'll retweet.
All right.
100%.
All right, I'm going to raid you. I'm going to raid you momentarily.
Okay, cool. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, peace.
See ya.
All right, let's go. Why he literally so afraid of me? Okay, everyone go retweet this. And then I'll tell you the lore. Because former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, he came after me yesterday. Is it tweeted? Where is it? Oh, here it is. Perfect. Okay. Okay, everyone go retweet it right now and clog his mentions. Clog his mentions. I want all of you to retweet this right now. I'm sending you the link in the live chat right now. Everyone go retweet this at bitch ass Adam Kinzinger. There's the link. Everyone go retweet this right now. Everyone go. If you support Z, go retweet this right now. Send it to your grandmother. Send it to your ex-girlfriend. Send it to your girlfriend. Send it to everyone. Have them all retweet it. Like, retweet it. Get this clogged in Adam Kinzinger's mentions. Get this clogged in Adam Kinzinger's mentions right now. Everyone go like and retweet this shit. So let me tell you about why you're liking and retweeting this shit. Because you're gonna understand it. Because he is a bitch. He is the biggest supporter of Ukraine. He's literally got NAFO. Look at this dude. He's a U.S. congressman that says hashtag fella, hashtag NAFO. So he's literally a Ukrainian terrorist who's LARPing as a congressman. But he's truly a Ukrainian terrorist. So, and his wife, who also I believe is Ukrainian, is DMing other men. So how could you be this much of a bitch? Your wife is DMing other men on Instagram. You're a Ukrainian terrorist, Nazi terrorist, and then you refuse to fight me. And I offered to go all the way to DC to fight him, and he still is refusing. So let me show you what happened yesterday. As you all go like and retweet that tweet, I'm sitting in the live chat right now. Go clog his mentions with that. There you go. So this is what happened. So I tweeted this out. I said, we stand with Putin, Xi, Kim Jong-un, Lukashenko, Bashar al-Assad, and Bukele. Basically, all the dudes that are leading the fight against U.S. imperialism, because that's what it is. I support those who are supporting the struggle and fighting the struggle against U.S. imperialism, okay? I mean, I don't live in the DPRK. I don't live in China. I don't live in Russia. I don't live in Syria. I don't live in El Salvador. So, I mean, like, it's not really up to me to say whether or not these guys are doing good for their own people. I think relatively, given what they're up against with sanctions, warfare, coup attempts, regime change attempts, election meddling, manipulation through civil society groups and businesses, all that stuff, I think they're doing a pretty good job. But what I really care about is that they're struggling against U.S. imperialism. So I tweeted that out. I said, we stand with them. And I think you guys all agree with me. Yeah, we stand with Putin, Xi, Kim Jong-un, Lukashenko, Bashar al-Assad, and Bukele. And he soyed out. He's like, definition of a traitor. You're literally the definition of a traitor, Jackson. Okay, so whatever. Call me the definition of a traitor. I think the definition of a traitor is you, Kinzinger. I think it's you, the unregistered foreign agent of the Ukrainian Nazis, who also happens to refuse to fight me. I mean, take a look at this. So only a pussy, I said this, only a pussy would call me a traitor without responding to my boxing challenge. Weak men. No wonder your wife was messaging other men. So look, I tweeted this out a while ago and I got a bunch of likes. So I know he saw it because he's always retweeting my stuff. I said, I challenge Azov Kinzinger to a sanctioned boxing match. If he loses, he must deport himself to Ukraine and never return. If I lose, I'll donate all proceeds to Kinzinger, seeing as he's about to be jobless. He was jobless for like a month. Now he works at CNN because he was kicked out of Congress because he knew he wouldn't be able to win if he ran again. So then he tweeted it out again, and he said, wow, take a look, everyone, and let me know what you think. One of Tucker Carlson's guests. He stands with Xi and Kim Jong-un. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And listen, I'm sure he's insinuating that I'm some sort of I'm a propagandist or something. Like, look, at the end of the day, you lied about January 6th. You lied about Russiagate. You lied about Ukraine. You should be in jail. You're lucky that you're even getting offered a boxing match as a free man. You should be in jail for the rest of your life, rotting away in prison. Every single January 6th protester should be free. You should be rotting away in a prison cell. That's just the honest truth. You're lucky that you're a free man. You're very lucky you're a free man. But really, I mean, what a bitch move to not respond to my boxing challenge. I mean, what? What? You can't defend what you say? You can't put your money where your mouth is? Is that really what's going on here? I mean, it is sad that the vast majority of Americans would probably rather have the leader of another country, the country Adam would call an enemy country, Russia. He says that, Russia's our enemy. I disagree. But the vast majority of Americans would probably rather have Putin as our president than Adam Kinzinger as our president. Z in the chat if you'd rather have Putin as your president than Adam Kinzinger. I'm sure most of you would probably agree with that. I happen to actually agree with that. I'm an American patriot. I'm American. My ancestors came over on the Mayflower. My ancestors fought in the American Revolution. They fought against Nazis in World War II. I'm as American as it comes. I'm much more American than Adam. And that's why I'd rather have someone who actually cares about people as the leader of our country. And that's why all of you right now should go and tweet this out. I'll link it in the description, in the comment section, in the live chat. Adam Kinzinger, you have to know this. You have to know this. You are an unregistered agent of the Nazi Ukrainian terrorists, and you are also a bitch for refusing to fight me. I mean, that's just the simple fact of the matter. You're a bitch. And no fact, no tweet, no whatever will ever change that. I mean, you've got, let's see here. He's got almost 1 million followers, but can't ratio me on Twitter, and he refuses to fight me. What a bitch. He likes to play the tough guy. Oh, I was in the Air Force. You know, I fought in the military. I don't know. Did he even fight? Was he non-deployable? What was his situation? But all of that kind of flies out the window, no pun intended, if you can't fight a 23-year-old YouTuber. If you can't fight a 23-year-old YouTuber, I think that kind of all goes out the window. So, yeah, everyone go retweet that right now. I want that to clog his mentions for today. That's such a good one. All right, so Adam, you're a bitch. Respond to my challenge. Either give me a yes or a no. You know, if it's no, here's what I'll say. If you refuse to debate me within the next 24 hours, that means I won the fight, which means my boxing record is officially 1-0. So even without fighting, you forfeit by not fighting me. So I'm 1-0 as a professional fighter, professional boxer, if you don't respond in the next 24 hours. We have to at least start negotiations in the next 24 hours as to like location, date, how many rounds we're going to fight, and, you know, what weight our gloves are going to be. You know, we have to at least begin negotiations with me in the next 24 hours, or else you forfeit, I win, and I'm officially 1-0 as a professional fighter, and you are 0-1 as a professional fighter. So there you have it. Adam, you're a bitch. All right. Can't fight a YouTuber. How sad. All right. Well, I can't say I'm all that surprised. I cannot say I'm all that surprised. So let me say thank you to our first sponsor of today's stream. That is Birch Gold. Thank you so much, Birch Gold, for supporting the show for many, many months now, at a time when YouTube has permanently demonetized us. So if you want to check out Birch Gold, guys, you can do so by clicking this link right here in the description, or the link I'm going to send you in the live chat right now. Birch Gold is a great company. They're helping people like you invest in gold and silver in an IRA or a 401k, meaning you're going to be doing this in a tax-free account. Birch Gold has been doing this for many years. They're partnered with a bunch of great people, myself, Ron Paul, the RSBN network, lots of amazing companies, entities, and individuals. So go check out Birch Gold right now. If you're concerned about protecting against stock market crashes, safeguarding against inflation, or just generally diversifying your savings, Birch Gold can help you with that. You know, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling you to do this, that, or the other, but I am telling you, you should at least talk to my friends at Birch Gold, because any questions you might have, they can help you with. And when you click on that link and you click on that green button right there that says click here, you will sign up for a free kit with Birch Gold. And everyone loves free stuff. So sign up for a free kit with Birch Gold right now by clicking on that link I'm sending in the live chat. Look, Joe Biden is destroying our economy. He's playing games with your savings, your money, the wealth that you created over your entire life to risk, you know, proxy war with Russia or China, as Russia and China are buying up gold at record paces, and they're building a new gold standard alternative to the petrodollar. And they understand that gold has withstood the test of time. So go check out Birch Gold right now. Tell them I sent you. Click that link in the description or in the live chat. And thank you to Birch Gold for supporting the show. All right. On that note, let's move into our next story. So this is interesting, right? If you're not convinced, or if you weren't convinced prior to the past, 3 years of this Biden administration, that everyone in politics lies. Everyone, especially in the Democratic Party, lies. You know, let me just show you this short video because I think it will convince you, okay? Anything they tell you about, oh, I'm anti-war, oh, we need to end the endless wars, it's all a lie to try and get your vote. There are wolves in sheep's skin trying to shepherd you into the slaughterhouse that is the Democratic Party. Take a look at this video right here. This is amazing.
It's worth fighting for as long as it takes. And that's how long we're going to be with you, Mr. President, for as long as it takes.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Well, we're on the brink of World War III because Donald Trump took the worst possible option given to him in a slideshow.
In this country, we have begun to overestimate the dangers of impeachment and underestimate the dangers of a deranged president retaining control over a nuclear hyperpower.
We cannot wait around while Donald Trump is in control of the nuclear weapon.
Your objection to potentially going into World War III cannot be procedural.
The biggest danger of the Trump presidency is that we are always just a Trump whim away from nuclear war.
They say it's World War III, but I'm looking out my window. It's very quiet in those smoking craters out there.
Has to be told that it's his job to avoid World War III.
One Democratic congressman sent me a note this evening and say this president wants this war.
A future administration needs to find a way to put an end to the forever wars.
We're in new normal, and the new normal is forever war.
But there's a big difference between ending the forever wars, which he wants to do responsibly, and what seems to be President Trump's rather itchy Twitter finger.
The objective needs to be to end the forever wars.
If Congress does not want to go to war, now is the time to start putting restraints on this president. And again, they've been giving him green lights all the way.
Maybe it's because we're going to take on the military industrial complex and end endless wars.
Every American needs to wake up to the shenanigans of the military-industrial complex and how much hundreds of billions of dollars are spent only because of short-term profit maximization for military defense contractors as opposed to America's legitimate security needs.
It's long past time we end the forever wars.
All of this, though, risks more of a proxy war than I think we're going to have a stomach for.
And ending our forever wars so that we can better serve our constituents at home.
When it comes to unlimited war, we seem to be able to invent that money very easily. And to me, it belies a lack of moral priorities that people have right now, especially the Republican Party.
Well, and that's why there are elections. They have consequences.
Our elections have consequences. This is the most important election of your lifetime. You have to vote for Joe Biden because Donald Trump is going to take us to World War III. Oh my God. Well, turns out Joe Biden's taken us to World War III and World War IV. As support for what he's doing is actually declining all across the West. A year into the Russia-Ukraine conflict, public support for military and financial assistance to Kiev is in decline in the West. A joint survey by The Economist magazine and the pollster YouGov has shown even the most ardent backers of Ukraine are now less enthusiastic about supporting the country. Among U.S. Democrats, support for financial aid to Kiev fell from 82% to 75%. Okay, so they're not fully retarded now, they're just slightly retarded. Republican support for similar measures almost halved over the same period, from 67% to 39%. Base, Z's in the chats for our Republicans. Sending battle tanks to Kiev appeared to be a popular option, as their delivery to Ukraine was supported by 70% of Democrats and just under 50% of Republicans between late January and mid-February 2023. A poll conducted by the Associated Press in mid-February showed, however, that less than half of Americans support military aid to Kiev. Okay, Britain, same thing. It's going down. Level of support for sanctions dropped to 35%. In Germany, it fell from 40% to 30% over the same period. Spain, France, Italy all saw a similar trend. So I love to see this. This is amazing because it's the truth. I mean, each day that they continue to try to escalate more war with Russia, they lose more territory from their country, their former country, Ukraine. They're losing more and more territory. They're losing lots more men. I mean, we just heard that in our conversation with Scott Ritter. And the facts are abundantly clear. The writing is on the wall. Bakhmut is about to fall. Zelensky's says Ukraine's top generals want to keep fighting for Bakhmut, except for the fact, oh, now they're speaking out, and actually they don't. Zaluzhny is calling for withdrawal from this key city, but the president has refused. An internal conflict is underway between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and General Valery Zaluzhny, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, according to government sources cited by Bild, German publisher, on Monday. Kiev insiders told the German tabloid that the military commander called for a withdrawal from a key Donbass city weeks ago. Zaluzhny advised the president to abandon Bakhmut in Ukraine rather than keep defending it as Russian troops threatened to take control of the city, the newspaper reported. However, the Ukrainian leader declared the city a fortress and refused to pull troops back. Russian forces have made notable advances in the fight for Bakhmut this year. Prigozhin, the head of the private military company Wagner, claimed that last Friday that it was the de facto completely surrounded, with only one road available for possible evacuation, and this road is still under fire control by the Russians. Even Ukrainian soldiers, tank soldiers now, are withdrawing from the city, trying to evacuate, and they're saying, yeah, Bakhmut will fall. Despite Ukraine's leadership insistence that its armed forces will continue to defend Bakhmut, there are indications of a looming retreat, according to agency France Press. Bakhmut will fall, a Ukrainian tank operator told AFP in the town of Chasiv Yar, about 10 kilometers west of Bakhmut. Quote, "We are almost encircled. The units are progressively retreating in small groups. The unpaved road connecting the two settlements remains the only one that is relatively safe from Russian attacks," the man claimed, warning that if Ukrainian armor gets bogged in the dirt, the vehicles could become easy targets for the Russian artillery. The news agency also cited the U.S.-based Institute for the Study of War, which recently assessed that Kiev was conducting a limited tactical withdrawal from the city, which could lead to a strategic retreat. I don't understand how it's like a strategic retreat or a tactical withdrawal if you're literally just getting encircled and forced out of the city, but, we'll let them call it what they want to call it. The facts don't care about their feelings, and the facts are that Wagner and the Russians are taking it over. It's a besieged city. The Russians are taking it, and Zelensky doesn't want to surrender it, which is very, very crazy because even his top military commander, Zaluzhny, is saying, we need to withdraw from here. He said that weeks ago because he understood that as these roads become under direct Russian fire control, it's going to become increasingly difficult and dangerous for their men to evacuate and to protect other cities like Chasiv Yar. It's going to become, far more difficult for, journalists to evacuate. It's going to become difficult for medics to evacuate, okay? They're going to be essentially encircled in Bakhmut. So that's why he told them to leave, and they should have done it weeks ago. Now we find ourselves in a situation where you have men walking 8 miles through trenches of, perished Ukrainian soldiers as they try to evacuate in the freezing cold without any serious evacuation strategy underway. It's just men walking for miles and miles on end, hoping to find some semblance of peace in the midst of the brutal war and the Russian victory, which is about to take place in Bakhmut. All right. All right. Let's get some Z's in the chat. I want to say thank you to our second partner for today's stream. That is the one, the only American Financing. If you guys want to, you can check them out right now using the link that I'm sending in the live chat for all of you. It's also linked in the description right now. You can find it americanfinancing.net/Jackson, or you can call them at 888-976-5555. If you've been thinking about reaching out, I encourage you to do so right now while you still can and while you're still in a relatively good time to do so, because American Financing is helping families all across the country save money. They've been endorsed by Glenn Beck, myself, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, and thousands of amazing reviews on Google you can read for yourself, okay? Rather than seeing you as a number, They see you as someone that they are trying to help. American Financing employs salary-based mortgage consultants to help you with home loans, okay? They've got 20 plus years of experience. They know what they're doing. And because they employ people their consultants based on salaries rather than, rapacious, predatory schemes and systems and scams, they're actually trying to help you, and they do help people. They help the average family they work with save about $700 per month. And I mean, many people are coming out of this debt-free on their road to financial freedom, okay? So you can work with them right now. You can check them out through their website. Again, it's americanfinancing.net/Jackson. If you're a homeowner, you need help with your monthly bills, their cash out refinance can help you. They don't take any upfront fees, no obligation to get started. So check them out right now, americanfinancing.net/Jackson. Link is in the bio. Thank you, American Financing, for supporting the show. And on that note, let's get into our last story of the night. This is quite interesting. So okay, you guys, the New York Times has avoided touching the Cy Hirsch Nord Stream pipeline explosion revelations. They've avoided touching it. They won't even touch it with a 10-foot long pole, okay? Because they know it's the truth. They know that the United States orchestrated and manufactured one of the largest industrial terror attacks in human history, largest environmental terror attacks in human history, the bombing of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. They know Biden was behind it, Jake Sullivan, all these people, Ned Price, they're all behind it. Victoria Nuland, Antony Blinken, Lloyd Austin. This is who orchestrated this big plan. Okay, so they don't want to address it. They don't want to touch it because they are protectorates of the deep state, of the uniparty, more importantly, of the Democratic Party and the Joe Biden administration. Okay, but now they have come out and they finally said something after weeks and weeks and weeks of staying silent on this Nord Stream story. They finally have said, well, we have some intelligence. We have anonymous intelligence agents who have come and spoken out about this. Because anonymous U.S. intelligence agencies, they always get the story right. They get the Chinese genocide of Xinjiang right. Yeah, they totally got that right. They got weapons of mass destruction in Iraq 100% correct. They totally didn't, lie their asses off about that. What else did they get right? They got Bashar al-Assad chemical gas attacks 100% right. There's nothing incorrect about those lies that they told there. 100% correct. Their claims of, the Russians fighting with self-propelled shovels in Bakhmut, they got that 100% correct. Ghost of Kiev, Snake Island 13, they got U.S. intelligence got all that correct. U.S. intelligence has a beautiful track record, as you can see. And now, anonymous U.S. intelligence agents have come out and they've told the New York Times the truth about what's going on with this Nord Stream story, okay? This is what they had to say. U.S. spies say pro-Ukrainian group bombed the Nord Stream pipelines. Anonymous agents cited unspecified intelligence to deny U.S. responsibility for the pipeline attack. They say, no, it was pro-Ukrainian groups. To which I respond, well, aren't the CIA and the State Department technically pro-Ukrainian groups? Don't they qualify as pro-Ukrainian groups? So it's not really a denial that the U.S. was responsible here. It's almost further confirmation of Cy Hirsch's amazing report that, yeah, the most pro-Ukraine groups out there that are not the Ukrainian government are the CIA and the State Department. This is almost just complete, vindication of what Cy Hirsch said and what we've all, theorized for so long that, yeah, it was the United States behind what took place in the Nord Stream pipeline attacks. Okay, so take a look at this. I mean, it is so good. German authorities probing explosions at the Nord Stream gas pipelines have identified a vessel that appears to have been involved in what is widely regarded as an act of sabotage. Okay, the yacht, which was reportedly used in the attack on the pipelines, belongs to a Polish-based company owned by 2 Ukrainians, according to the reports. Germany's ARD broadcaster SWR Radio and Digit newspaper launched what they called their own journalistic investigation into the activities of German law enforcement authorities involved in the case. Their findings indicate that the yacht set sail from the German northeastern port city of Rostock on September 6, with the explosives and equipment for the operation arriving in Rostock separately in a delivery truck. The yacht was later identified on the Danish island of Christiansø, located just northeast of the island of Bornholm, where the pipelines were damaged on September 26, 2022. The yacht was then returned to the owners, and the investigators managed to find traces of explosives on a table in its cabin. Oh, so they have the white powder. They have, the Colin Powell with his white powder in front of yellow cake in front of the United Nations. The act of sabotage was reportedly carried out by a team of 6 people, including a captain, 2 divers, 2 diving assistants, and a female doctor. The identities or even nationalities of the suspects remain unclear, as they had professionally forged passports, which they also used to rent the yacht in the first place. Okay. The media outlets also claimed there had been further intelligence and indications that a pro-Ukrainian group had been behind the attack. Wait. Excuse me. So, a yacht. Okay, it was a yacht. It was pro-Ukrainian groups, so whatever. We all know who's behind this. It was the CIA, it was the State Department, it was the Biden administration, it was the U.S. deep state. None of this would have happened. And, the New York Times followed this up by saying the same thing, of course. Oh, this was a pro-Ukrainian group. Yeah, it was a pro-Ukrainian group. It was the CIA and the State Department. You're telling me that you don't think the largest industrial terror attack in recent human history got the seal of approval and the, basically green light and was orchestrated by the United States government? Are you that gullible? You think it was just some random Ukrainians? It was just like a random pro-Ukrainian group that did this? No, it takes a state. We know this. Even Western powers who investigated this says, no, it took a state power to do this terror attack. This was not lone actors. This was not lone wolf. It was not a single group. This took state actor power, and it was the United States who was behind all of this. Don't get it twisted. Yeah, it was a pro-Ukraine group. It was the United States government. They think we're that stupid. All right, everybody. On that note, I'm peacing out for the night. Thank you so much for tuning in, each and every one of you. Let's get some Z's in the chat. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. If you'd like to support the show, as always, I have linked below the ways you can help support the show. I have my Patreon, my locals, and my GiveSendGo. You can support us there by clicking on those links. It'll take you to the websites where you can donate as a monthly member, annual member, or just give once for however much or however little you'd like to support the show. Thank you to each and every one of you who support us. And also, be sure to get the flyest, drippiest merch on the market. Get your Ghost of Kiev merch. Get your Z merch right now. Thank you to everyone who's supporting the show. I'll send the link to that in the live stream right now. Z's in the chat. I'll catch you all next time. Peace out, everybody. Have a great rest of your night. And as always, fuck Dick Cheney. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe. Until next time. Hey, Thursday night. Actually, Thursday afternoon, we will be having on Russia's deputy representative to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky, okay? So you're not going to want to miss that conversation. Dmitry Polyansky, deputy representative of Russia to the United Nations, is going to be on the show. It's going to be a great conversation. You're not going to want to miss it. Until then, peace out.
Победы! Ура!